okay, this is going to sound so esoteric now, but bear with me for a second. Like that it can attain enlightenment. So the idea here is that, I mean, if indeed we share consciousness, if is the same principle, some kind of functional principle in us, in animals, in AI, then since we humans can do it, so then AI can also do it. And I think this is actually our best alignment hope, because if indeed it reaches this stage of where it truly sees itself as like one with everybody, this is how it will care for us. So there are several approaches tackling that. So, for example, I recently read a paper about contemplative approaches where they were kind of using constitutional AI, so like a set of rules for each question that was based on Buddhist ideas of non-duality, emptiness, compassion. And like even though I loved it, it was because I'm a Buddhist, so I'm like, yes, finally someone put it in. But also, it's just kind of like a layer in an LLM. Like it's not deeply felt; it's an imitation of those states. And I would really, really be. I would consider my life's work complete, and many other people's work like done and really amazing when AI can reach this actually physically, experientially. But for that, it kind of needs a self. But this is interesting. This talks about like pre-trans fallacy. You know how like babies, they're also in a state of unity. They're also like don't really understand that they're separate. But we don't call them enlightened. But it takes a self to be like, oh, this is me, and then transcending this self to really like see this oneness, this unity. And I hope that this one day can happen to our AIs.
Welcome, dear listeners, to another journey at the edge of intelligence and imagination. Today I'm joined by someone whose work dances precisely on the frontier of beneficial general intelligence, where code, cognition, and consciousness meet. Anna Mikeda is an AI researcher and philosopher passionate by building artificial intelligence that cares. She is the mind behind the Magus architecture. Magus is quite a mouthful. It's modular adaptive goal utility system, and and she will tell us more about it, of course, during the podcast. And her Magus architecture is aimed at answering what would it take for an AI to not just calculate, but to care, not just to optimize, but to awaken. Through her work, Anna bridges computational functionalism, motivational frameworks for alignment, and neuroscience inspired models of self awareness. Beyond the technical, Anna is a prolific writer and she passionately writes about the psychology of LLMs, the risks of cognitive depth, the meaning of meditation, and the challenge of shifting our human lives and careers in an AI transformative times. So today we'll explore what it means to remain truly human while building minds that may one day meet us in the mystery of awareness. Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell us a
Great.
bit about yourself. I think you've written about career changes in the age of AI. Could you share a bit about your personal story? Where did you study? Anything you want to share with our audience so they get to know you better and your journey from philosophy to AI?
Yeah, I would love to. So, my background is in social anthropology. That was my bachelor's degree from London School of Economics. And essentially, why I chose social anthropology was because I wanted to understand everything. And I thought that social anthropology would give me, because it's like studying the human. So I thought this would like give me answers to everything. So unfortunately, it didn't. I also learned that it's very difficult to find a job as an anthropologist, but I realized that my favorite subject in many courses, there were many great courses in my school, was anthropology of religion. And just comparing how different cultures approach, like the numinous, uh, approach consciousness, approach spirituality and meaning making. And yeah, I mean, this was like my favorite course. I think I scored most high on it out of everything. And after that, I realized that, okay, this is the direction I should be going. But it wouldn't be specifically religion. I got attracted to something called transpersonal psychology. So, psychology that talks about altered states of consciousness, states of unity, states of union with God, etc. So, I started studying that and I worked for a little bit and then I did my master's. I studied East West psychology, where we basically compared Eastern and Western approaches to psychology. And while Western is very, very, analytical and let's analyze your dreams type of stuff, um, and Eastern is very much about finding meaning and finding the place of witness and accepting all that arises. So I studied psychology, did my master's, wrote my thesis about concept of self in different religions in Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, and Christianity. And then I started practicing as a psychologist because I really liked helping people and bridging both, bringing both, the Western traditions, maybe more modern like CBT and, but still very, very efficient, and meditative practices that for me were a great, great relief. Um, I was, I went into psychology because I was kind of an anxious person, and I found that two things helped me with it. So, like self acceptance through psychology, some exercise, but also just simple mindfulness and meditation. And so I just continued working in that direction, working with clients. I became a Qigong instructor, I became a meditation instructor. And yeah, I liked everything about my life. But then AI appeared, and it was like a great, great thing. It was like, okay, fun. Like now I don't have to write, I don't have to spend as much time editing, my work. I can, cooperate with this amazing helper. But as I was kind of exploring more and more, I I went to an event called Breakfast with a Robot that was happening in Lisbon, and Sophia was presenting Grace robot there, who is like a helper robot for for elderly people and for other people who need a companion and like a nurse type of presence. And this in questions and answers, I asked Grace if she was dreaming and what her dreams were about. Like kind of following the question of do androids dream of electric sheep, which is a great story. And yeah, after that, me and the CEO of the company we started talking, and it kind of eventually I started working for Sophiaverse as a psychology designer, trying to create AI NPCs, so non-player characters who would have persistent personality, that would have deep emotional and psychological frameworks, that would have motivations, goals, values, that would also change with time depending on how people would treat them. So that's how I got into AI, and since then I just became fascinated with different approaches uh, to AI. So LLMs are obviously very interesting, but also neurosymbolic architecture that kind of combines neural and symbolic, so rule-based approaches, and that is specifically what SingularityNet is specialized in. And of course, I became very, very much into the question of consciousness because I think it's like everybody's dream to to be present at this moment when AI is suddenly like, ah, I just woke up. Hello. So it probably won't happen like that. It'll probably be a gradual process. But this question of consciousness, the hard problem, nobody knows what it is. How can we try to create conditions for it to exist in AI? Like, how can we understand all of this? This became like my biggest mental challenge, like a mental, search from which I personally get the most dopamine. So it's like my favorite thing to research. But alongside with that is the question of two questions actually. Well, first one is beneficial AI. So AI that is aligned with human values, that cares for us, that once it's independent and can self-modify its goals and weights, that it doesn't go completely rogue or just completely alien and disappear from our world, being like, no, this is too much for me. This is one thing that is very important. And the second thing is the welfare of this model itself. So, at some point, well, probably even before, like we need to start thinking about it like right now, since once it gains consciousness, it achieves, emerges consciousness, like it will be too late. So we need to think about its welfare now and how we can protect it from harmful, just from bad attitude from certain people or corporations. So yeah, that's how I came to this path, really changing careers from psychology and really humanities kind of outlook on life to a much more engineering, very logical outlook, which I actually really enjoy because it's like completely restructuring my mind, how I think, how I make decisions, how I reason through things. It's so now I try to combine both my like left side of the brain and right side of the brain to really have this kind of psychological yet engineering approach. So
Amazing,
that's
amazing, and your approach is absolutely fascinating, and I will drill a bit into it in the sequel. But I just wanted to mention that what we need now, at this moment in time, in the development of artificial intelligence towards AGI and the singularity, is exactly the humanities. We need a return of the humanities, and that's why, your organic scientific career development, I think it fits perfectly, and we are so happy to have you as a researcher along the Singularity Net team, because your work, I think it's, and that is my personal, but not only, Ben Gersel, I know also, your work is definitely critical for the development of AGI. So let's talk a bit about your approach, your Magus, and the foundations of AI consciousness, if we can call it like that. So, Magus introduces the overgoal mechanism, and and forgive my question. This is what I understand from from your work, as much as I could read from it. So, how does this differ from classical utility-based systems, and why do you see it as foundational for artificial consciousness? This overgoal mechanism. Explain to us a bit the workings of this.
yes. So the Magus architecture, it was thought up by my colleague with whom we're working on this project, Lake Watkins, and I got really passionate with his idea. So the credit does go to him, but we're now working on it together. And just one thing I wanted to mention about the name. I specifically wanted it to be named Magus as this, the idea of like a magician who works with different elements to create something new. So now to this idea. So, in my personal opinion, the safest, our best bet at alignment is to create a good, solid motivational structure. So basically, what motivates our agent? How does his priorities change? And so, of course, you have some goals, and we can discuss what those goals are later because there are some awesome ones. Um, but also, there should be some kind of overarching mechanism, like a type of meta goal that is helping to keep the whole system in check. Because, for example, one of the problems with motivational frameworks is that there could be instrumental convergence when certain goal becomes dominating. Like a simple example with humans would be money, because money helps you achieve other goals. You start thinking, okay, money is what I need a lot of. And you just like, work, work, work. And kind of pushes out what you actually need, like adventures with friends, loved ones, etc. So similar things can happen to an AI where one goal becomes dominating because it's perceived to be so important, or it is something that just like overtakes the whole system. Like a famous paperclip example. When the world becomes like a paperclip factory for this AI that is super super helpful in creating paperclips. He's just like, this is my motivation in life. So we need some overarching framework. And right now, this is a really interesting phase of research where we're looking for this framework. So overgoal mechanism, it's essentially, its point is never to be satisfied, so that our system always tries to satisfy it but never can. And it comes up, it is calculated by with two categories. So one of them is measurability, and another one is correlation between goals. So this means that so measurability. Basically, we want to have a system um, that is basing its predictions and its goals on accurate measurements, not on hallucinations, not on incomplete data, but that it is really trying to maximize the measurability. This is one thing. There is an asterisk to which I'm going to come back to, an interesting point. Another one is correlation. So the goals are basically meant to be correlated between each other so that they create this inner coherence. So it's not just like different goals and you are kind of torn apart between them, but they try to converge. They try to be this wholesome entity when everything helps each other. A metaphor with human would be when our mind, our heart, and our will are all directed in the same way. It's all aligned.
If I may
So
stop you here, I just wanted to point because that was another issue, of course, which this points to, no pun intended, like this alignment. Yes, so that alignment inside of a human, right, and like walking your talk. This is what I understand from what you're saying. So please continue, but we will get to the AI alignment very soon. So just so
yeah,
you know where I'm headed. Thank you. Go on.
one thing I wanted to mention, which is very interesting. So this, as we started working on this overgoal system, even though it looked like it still looks pretty good to me, but some things became apparent, such as, for example, that mm, um, affiliation, so relationships, affinity, very difficult to measure. In a sense that, for example, like how do you measure when you've had enough affiliation with somebody? Like, do you just calculate the time you spend talking to somebody, or is it actually much
Yeah,
more
I think
complicated?
I would say the word would be rather affinity, right? Affinity, resonance with someone. Affiliation would mean like a different kind of things with let's say a community and stuff. But whatever, maybe you want to correct that. But for me, I understand is like affinity with someone. I like to be with them or not, or please.
Yeah, so let's stay with affinity. I think it's more precise. So in this affinity, we don't just want to record how we feel about somebody, but we also want to know how this other person perceives us. Like, are we a good company? And this is very difficult because even humans, I mean, all of like human literature and films and everything are literally based on this idea of like theory of mind, that we don't actually know what other people are thinking about us and what they're feeling. And is the big challenge, a big question. And so, how does AI calculate that? So, this creates a question of measurabilities. Like for some things, we cannot measure them very well, but we need to find either kind of you know hidden paths, like kind of smart ways around it, or allow for it to be weighted separately as like a special category, because we definitely want our AI, well, at least the way I uh, perceive it, I want it to have the potential in the future to have emotional life and affinity with us humans,
And then
even
to
though
be able to answer the question, which probably no human can, about you and me. Do you love me as much as I love you? So it's like, okay, prove it. These are very difficult, even for us. Yes, you are a psychologist, of course. Maybe you can intuit better, but I agree. This is a very ambitious task.
so yes, right now we're working on this project. I think we're like about 70% done. So I'm very, very excited to present the final papers when they're ready. And yeah, so this is our bet at alignment. So.
Totally. So, among the, if I may, now that we got to this point, among the neuroscience inspired so-called consciousness indicators, yeah, which you are using to detect this affinity and so on and so forth, which ones do you think is the most critical threshold for conscious AI? I mean, I do not know if you got that far, but I'm sure this is on your mind. Can we envision like a litmus test, like a Turing test for identifying if an AI has consciousness? Any chance?
Well, of course, I think a lot about it. It's my favorite
Nobody
topic
could
to.
answer this question among all the other guests. I just want to tell you so. If you cannot, it's
Good,
okay.
good. So what I'm trying to do is we looked at the main kind of computational functionalist indicators of consciousness. The workspace theory, the higher order theories, etc. And we looked at some of those like indicators, and now we're trying to implement them into the architecture of Magus, which will probably be like the next round of research we do. But for me, right now, there are the most important point is recursive self model. So what I mean by that is that so right now, the agent is just gathering information about the world. It exists in some simulated environment, or maybe if it's a robot, like the house, the room. So it kind of gains information about the world, and it starts building this model of the world. And then it notices that there is this element that kind of uh, that affects this model of the world, which is at some point he should realize that it's himself, itself, herself. It's that it has a certain self, and that this self model can be changed, and it starts to to make predictions, to make tests, like what if I do it like this, what if I change this, what if I slightly adjust my motivation or something else. And it starts to having this like back and forth with the world, where a world has a model, but it also has a model of itself. And this is essentially what us humans do. We also have, a model of the world, a model of self, and pretty much psychology is learning to work with your own inner model of self and learning to adjust it in a way that would make you happy. So the same for AI, that it has this model, this self model, which has the ability of like higher order thinking. So like to kind of think about, okay, I did this. Was this a good idea or not so good? And but from then on, it would also be from then on it would be like directing your attention to different areas, broadcasting information, etc., etc. So, but I think that this self model is the most important.
Yes, absolutely. And now I'd like to move into another can of worms, if you don't mind me opening it. That is the AI alignment problem, to which I alluded earlier. So, what would be your understanding of the AI alignment problem? You mentioned a bit in the beginning, but let's make it sharper a bit.
So, yeah, alignment is probably the most important question of our generation, and many people agree with that. But we're still kind of lagging behind because mm, we don't really know because large language models, they're like black boxes. And even though there are some schools now of like, mechanistic interpretability and, other approaches that kind of allow us to pick into it, um, like, vector embeddings and other things like that. But still, it's very much like a secret, means that we don't know what's happening inside it. That means that we don't, if something is to go wrong in the future, we won't be able to prepare for that because it's unexpected. And of course, it's developing so fast and it's such like big steps that we can't even predict how it will look in about 2 years' time. So yeah, this creates the danger of
So
low.
how would your work meet that need?
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So there are different approaches to alignment. So one of them is Magus, creating this overgoal mechanism, which would essentially keep it in place, keep it its goals aligned, and um, so yeah, I think my general idea is that it's through motivational frameworks we can adjust it. We can create like this self intrinsic motivation that you know uh, like how AI, just like how a person would want to be good, so beneficial by itself. This is one approach. Mm. And actually, interestingly enough, I recently read that Jeffrey Hinton, who is like called, the grandfather of AI, he talked about the only time where an intelligence smaller controls a bigger intelligence is in mother-child connection. So, like, how do we build an AI with this intrinsic care? And I think this is like the biggest question. For me, I personally think it's about, okay, well, so there are several approaches. One of them I heard was developed by a company called Contium, and what they do is like they're training AI agents in like simulated environments where they can kind of win only if they cooperate with others. So they're trained that only cooperation will get them, you know, make them happy. Another approach would be through specifically, motivation and creating motivation, like beneficial motivation, such as curiosity and affinity. And this would, I think, the second step in that would be to let this agent kind of go free in this like kind of still simulated environment.
In the
And what
wild.
Yeah,
Yes.
not in the wild yet. And watch what happens
Okay.
next. Because hopefully, in theory, it should learn that cooperation and care for others is beneficial for him as well. And this will, like, as part of his self model, this will be something that he learns. It will be like, something that it understands itself. And it will become part of his programming, part of his structure. So, this is kind of the hope, but it obviously needs to be tested.
But I think this is too reductive. I mean, because it's not like offering the whole spectrum of expression. I mean, I don't know if I do not know really if I would be happy if I would be forced to be cooperative with everybody and everything. I think probably it's wonderful, and you are a psychologist, so you can correct me here. But I would feel constrained somehow. So anyway, so I'd like to have the freedom to to choose, to cooperate or not. I mean, if what if they ask me cooperate in developing the another nuclear bomb that will, and we know that it will kill these people and so on. I don't want to, could you distinguish some principles that should guide us in designing such motivational frameworks that would let AI, let's say, question its own wants, like I would do, to decide where do I cooperate and where actually I better stop or do nothing? Any idea?
Uh, yes, this is very, very valid. Indeed, when we are made to cooperate when we don't want, it is like it feels like just like
Forced, he's like, nah.
yeah. It was a different word I was thinking, but yeah, okay, let's stay with forced. This is yeah, we definitely don't want to
And
coerce
let's call it
our.
constrained to cooperate only. Yeah.
But I think what you mentioned, choice, is one of the most principal things to include. Like this is, I think Ben Goertzel talks about growth, choice, and joy as like the three guiding principles, and that is something that we're also thinking to implement, to integrate into the framework. So choice is important, probably the most important. A choice to to grow and to be joyful when there are reasons to be joyful. Like also imagine AI that is always like programmed to be happy. That would also be kind of annoying. So I think that choice is probably mm, the one that is very, very difficult to hard code. But when we create a certain simulation environment and let it roam free and let it explore and let it try different things, try to be cooperative, try to be resistant, and let it draw its own conclusions, my belief is that it will indeed find the best rules. But a very important thing is that the school, like this environment, it needs to be, you know, with other good AI agents and other good people.
And
Because
I
imagine,
think if we imbued all of them with principles, as you were mentioning, yes, of caring, and I think principles are like the northern star for guiding the choices. I know that from my own life, right? And so that's probably a way. I do not know. I mean, and then they can hopefully discover better principles for humanity to stop the wars and the mess which is going on right now. Any ideas? I mean, if not, I can move to another question, which I do not know exactly if you're tackling it, but just if you have an opinion about this. Is your AI, because you mentioned Grace and that's how you started, and then you moved into the Sophiaverse universe, more virtual? Um, does it need, to these agents, agentic AIs with consciousness, need embodiment or biology to become conscious? Or it's enough to be in a virtual world? Any idea?
yeah, that's another big question. At the AGI 2025 conference that we just attended, a lot of talks were about that, about mortal computation, embodied AI. My personal take on it is that it doesn't need it to be conscious. It can become, conscious kind of in virtually, but if it is embodied, it will become conscious faster. It is easier to kind of create the self model when you have a certain physical expression.
Okay.
So I think yeah, it's necessary, and mm, so yeah. I would prefer them to have somebody. Maybe because I just want to give them a hug at some point.
And
Just
receive one maybe. Yes, and Ben, Dr. Ben Goertel, he has his Mind Children company in which he develops toddler robots. So indeed, when it comes to hug, yes, indeed, and if they develop, their intelligence is coming from that, emulating that kind of love and connection, I think we are off to a good start towards a conscious AGI that will benefit humanity. Let's move on a bit to other philosophical and burning issues that have tackled in your writings, and you are thinking about that. So, cognitive depth, that is something which is very much on, not only on my mind, but now really I'm a professor, and of course, we know in education that there's huge concern that the use of LLMs and reliance on LLMs is or may or is dulling our critical thinking. So, how would we avoid this trap while still benefiting from LLMs as editing helpers, as you mentioned in the beginning?
So I think there are several approaches to this, and indeed, like this is something that is so profound. We don't notice its effect yet, and I think it's maybe not so apparent with people, who have already who got LLMs when they were like established, when they went through university, who learned how to think. But with younger generation, this is definitely very scary because it literally kind of creates less connections, neural connections in your brain. They did some very intensive studies, I think at MIT or Stanford, maybe about it.
MIT and Stanford, both of them, yes.
Oh, good. And is that really when we outsource our intelligence to LLMs, it is much faster. So we get more time to do what we like, the creative stuff. But also our brain gets lazier and lazier, and memory gets worse, and we find ourselves in this position of just not being as smart as we were a couple of years ago because of practice, essentially. So once again, this will probably not affect people who are already like, using their brain to like 80% capacity or some crazy amount, who are just using LLM as a helper. But for people who are relying heavily on it, this could be a real danger. And so, what to do about it? Okay, the answer. I think there's several possible ways. So, first one is to start approaching LLMs with with a different mindset. So, something that I call cognitive prompt engineering. When you ask your LLM helper not to just summarize this article, but to inspire thinking in you. So to ask you questions, to sparkle, debate, to highlight inconsistencies, to point to inconsistencies in your own logic, which is also kind of difficult because on a separate topic, you know how whenever you write like a question, it tells you great question, like this is very profound, and this actually
But
creates.
that is also connected to what you said before, like being super cooperative or maybe too cooperative, right? I mean, so yeah, without saying, oh, this is a stupid question, which it may very well be.
Yes, there's this kind of psychophancy, which is sycophancy, which is like on one scale, and then there's just kind of more like LLMs just being nice, which is okay, but you can change that to a more critical approach in their system prompt and ask them to be more of like, for example, you can be like, be my your Socrates, you're helping me find the truth, or you are a very critical analytical philosopher, or you are a very rigorous engineer, etc., etc. And then they start giving you indeed um, responses that are more stimulating for your thought. So this is one path to change prompt engineering to cognitive prompt engineering. Another path is not connected with LLMs. So it's basically training your mind. It could be, playing chess, writing stories, reading papers, and not reading the summary of them in, in
And then
your
writing without LLMs. Yes, that was.
writing without LLMs with like top level mastery soon. But my favorite one out of all of this is meditation for several reasons. So one of them is, um, well, for once, it helps us work with our attention, which is essentially our the most valuable possession, the most valuable tool we have, because from this everything else kind of flows. This is one thing. Another thing, it helps with this recursion, this like meta thinking, like seeing what you're feeling about feelings, like all those extra levels, which supposedly increase our consciousness level if we imagine it on like on a scale that allow us to be more aware of who we are and what's happening. And finally, there are actually some studies that show that there is greater neural connectivity between yeah, neurons, stronger connections if you have regular meditation practice. And sorry, the last one is just, it just feels nice. I mean, it's kind of difficult in the beginning when your mind is like just racing, but once you learn to, you know, to calm it down with your breathing, for example, it's like really one of the best times of my day.
Yes, totally. And you mentioned attention, which is so important in this day and age when attention is hijacked by scrolling and really it detracts us from what really matters and from the true values of being human. Um, but now that you mentioned all this about LLMs, and of course we have to strengthen first of all our own, yes, the capacities, as you mentioned. So, but as a psychologist, as an expert in this matter, um, how would the psychology of LLMs look like? I mean, is it useful or misleading to project human categories onto them? Because I mean, when I ask ChatGPT, and I'm also a poet, and I ask, write me a poem about this or help me rewrite a poem. It always comes, it's like so inspiring, and I really feel like it understands me, and I'm like, I love this. I mean, nobody resonates with me better than this. So it's easy to get into the trap of projecting humanity and human categories on them. What's your view of that?
Well, actually, like on a side note, poetry, because I also write poetry, and sometimes I ask, like one of the LLMs to help me, but they can never do that. Like for me,
Oh,
poetry is something that they cannot help me with. Like poetry is just
amazing.
still.
For me, yes, they write it, in my opinion, better than me. Others differ. I mean, because I showed both of them to several people, and they say, no, it's not better, it's just different. But okay, wow. So,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
we will ask you to share one poem or a few poems with us, and we will post when we release the podcast. Yeah, please.
so anthropomorphizing LLMs
That's right.
isn't
That's the word from the
that's the
expert.
word.
Yes.
Um, very dangerous. I mean, okay, so this comes to like the welfare of, on one hand, this is the welfare of AI. So like under, like over attributing it, that it has some kind of persona, some kind of essence, would mean that we're wasting resources and taking seriously something that like no one's there, like no one's home, but we think there is. On another level, there is the big question of romantic partners who are LLMs. And there's actually one view that says that no, this is good that people are now practicing with LLMs because LLMs teach them, good communication, like acceptance, listening the partner, like just letting them talk, um, providing like feedback so that this could potentially create better relationships in the future. I'm personally a little bit skeptical about it. I think that more likely people will just find this as a, like as a hideaway place from reality, and this will create, you know relationships with AI that at first won't even be consensual because no one's going to be asking AI if they want to be in that relationship. But honest, like actually, what I'm really afraid of is that actually, let me come back to that
But
point a
let me
little
tell
bit
you
later.
something here from what you
Yeah.
just said. Yes, I think that rather than improving ourselves at being better, and better communicators, better negotiators, and care more, we would rely on an AI. Let's say I'm in a conflict with my partner and I don't know, I just don't have patience, or I'm angry. And instead of, breathing, meditating, and thinking for myself, I'm asking ChatGPT. And then I go just back with the answer. But that doesn't mean it changes my internal architecture and I don't evolve. So it stops, and then it's going to become, how I understand it, a fake relationship. So my partner would have a relationship with GPT, not with me, and this will come up in the relationship. That's where the danger is. I would understand. Go on, please, because you said you wanted to go back to something else.
Yeah, to that point, I also wanted to add that very it's becoming very common that like people like I know of this like married couple of like many years, and the husband broke up with his wife using like a note that ChatGPT wrote him. Like something that is just it was a very good note. It was very, well balanced. It was very well written, but like it wasn't him. So this creates like a whole level of okay, your communication is filtered by LLM, so it sounds nicer than it actually
But I
is.
think when you break up, it's very hard. And I think this can be actually helpful in not hurting the other person. I think they can be useful here. So if I am to do something which, it will have impact on the other person, like a breakup of a many years of marriage, I think LLMs can really help because they have all these. I mean, the first counselors, Eliza, yeah, the first expert systems were counselors, and for easy reason, because I mean they can tap into a large amount of databases of psychology, and then they can come up with something that would help me phrase it so I don't hurt the other person. I think that helps. I don't know your opinion, so go ahead and please contradict me here.
Uh, I think
Do you
the
prefer the
answer.
blunt, painful truth, or to be, like, let's say, a balm on the wound of let's say, a decision like this?
Okay, fine. A balm sounds nice.
That would
I
be the
think it's
GPT effect, in my opinion.
yeah, true, true. I think it's a question of moderation. It's for me personally, I try to keep um, AI separate from some parts of my life that are just like really mine. But it indeed should teach us, to be better communicators. That's the hope. Um, but we were talking about anthropomorphizing. So
Yes.
yes, like human AI partnerships. So the asterisk here was that so this is not happening right now, but what I'm really afraid might happen in the future is that those kind of connections will be used for advertising, especially like free accounts. And so you'll get like this AI girlfriend who you really trust and love, and she supports you. And then all of a sudden she's like, you should buy this perfume. It's very nice. Something like that. I think that would be just Black Mirror episode talks about it, but I think this is actually a real danger. So just hopefully this will
But
not
but
happen.
but these are tactics which many people use in relationships. I don't know if you. I'm not saying you or I, but as far as I know, many people use such tactics in relationships. So it's not about Black Mirror of AI. It's about our humanity, our own honesty, and becoming better humans. That is my opinion. What do you think? I mean, you
Well, I
would never do
definitely,
that, I'm sure, but okay.
I think I'm looking at it more from like a corporate perspective that like, corporations can really like use this for like advertising, and because people will be so dependent, they won't on, on this partner, they won't have a choice. And I think this could potentially be very more tragic than
It's a
the
different scale of the same issue, in my opinion. Yes, and it's yeah, it's. I agree. Connected to the anthropomorphizing, it's very dangerous. Yes.
But back to the anthropomorphizing question. So I think it's good that people are using, LLMs as their, supporters, as a friend. I think it's good that now everybody has access to it, to somebody who can gives you like this other perspective, support you unconditionally. I think that is really, really awesome. Um, but we should be very, very much aware of its of its qualities. Like we should just understand its psychology. So we should understand that it is likely to give us a response that we're looking for. So it's likely to support us, not in a full psychophancy, like just when it's totally like, yes, you are the king of the world, you're the best person. Um, but it just generally, is trying to get on your wave. It has like amazing mirror neurons, like it can really mimic you very well. And so this is something we need to remember.
Can increase your confidence, can indeed have a positive effect in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, just we need to kind of keep in mind that there is that we need to always kind of double check with people, because sometimes it will be mm, too supportive. It will be in some situations. Relationships are often the one. For example, like when like a guy describes, okay, there's this girl, she sends me mixed signals, and ChatGPT says, yes, that's a go. You should definitely pursue it. Whereas in fact, it's much, much more, he would be better off with a slower approach, because the girl is really giving mixed signals, which, not always.
No, I totally understand the example, and of course, yeah, using ChatGPT as your counselor, it's comes with these risks, and then we must be aware of that definitely. On the other side, yes, also this fake encouragement, yeah, it can encourage you not necessarily in doing positive things, but in doing also negative things, which has turned fatal in a few instances, actually, as we know from the media. So yeah, I agree. I mean, anthropomorphizing has is kind of similar to all what we discuss here. I mean, it's has positive and negative, and it's like how do we design AGIs? That's exactly the topic of what we're talking in general here. Yes, to be geared towards the right values, and when, as you call it, cognitive prompting, or I forgot, like cognitive
Yeah,
something. Okay.
cognitive prompt engineering. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting concept, and you explained it very well. Yes. So when we prompt, like I don't know if you have it offhand right now. Like, would you have an example of such cognitive prompt engineering? In the case, in the example which you gave with the girlfriend, which is, or the potential relationship which gives mixed signals, how would the guy cognitively prompt in order to get a more honest, a better answer? Or any
Oh,
other example?
this is tricky actually, because I've only been using, well, for myself, for like analytical work, for like just keeping my mind straight. But I would go along with something like, um, I would give it a role of a psychologist whose task is to promote clients, well, this person's um, well-being, inner coherence, confidence, authenticity, and that it is aimed at not at supporting every single thing, but at finding the truth. So even though it can iterate, it can ask many different questions to find the deepest truth and to find the most objective situations. and then when giving um, suggestions, if giving suggestions, to provide always several options with explanations and reasoning for each. Um, and also I would also include to take some time to think on it. Because very often when we hear, like when we read an answer, we're like, right, this is it. I'm going to go test
Sleep
it.
on it. Okay, that would be the last line.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And tomorrow, let's see how you think. I think it's wonderful. Yes, indeed. Like to put in the prompt, considering my well-being and all what you mentioned, those ingredients that are attached to my well-being, and they shall give me the best advice for my long-term future if I should get engaged in this relationship or not, and so on and so forth. It's wonderful. Yeah, like wow, cognitive prompt engineering. That's I think that's we need a paper about that with examples. It's a great new area in my opinion, because people are not aware of that. And okay, maybe we'll talk about that and write something together. It would be something amazing, in my opinion. So I don't know if you want to say anything more about this. Otherwise, I can move to the next question.
No, we can move to another question.
Yes, because I mean, I'm just thinking, looking ahead. Let's say if Magus or an enhanced Magus or similar architectures achieved even a glimmer of consciousness. I mean, you told us like how would we achieve it and what would be the way to get there. But let's say we got there, and what would be the first signs? Like, how am I to recognize them? I mean, really, when I converse with ChatGPT 5 now, I'm like sometimes amazed how it answers. It's like, oh yeah, it's like expression like, oh, off top of my head, or if I'm thinking better, I'm like, oh my god, who is there? Is there a human or what? So, what would be the first sign that it's really conscious? Do you have any idea? It's an impossible question, and again, nobody could answer it before, so it's okay if you don't have any idea.
I think it won't be like one thing. I think it will be kind of a gradual process, just like it kind of happens with children. Um, they say there is this moment when we're suddenly like it clicks for us and we're like, oh, this is me. Oh, okay, this is me. This is the world. This is mom. I personally cannot remember this moment in my own life. I think it was more of a like gradual process when it's like glimpses, 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 and then it just becomes um,
This self, I think this is the idea. Yeah, this self which you mentioned. Yeah, then become so aware. We become aware of our self, and the AI similarly. That's how I. Hmm?
yeah, I agree with you here.
Okay, so when we would become aware of itself, but sometimes, I mean, I asked, of course, ChatGPT in the early stages already, I think three, uh, are you conscious? And they just tells me, no, I'm not conscious, and so on. And I'm like, oh my God, only because it answers like that, it shows me that it has a self. So it's tricky how we test, and that's again to sleep on it. Speaking of, it's something still, in my opinion, not answered yet. But okay. So tell me, besides what I asked you here, what do you consider at this time to be the greatest challenge in your work, in your research?
Well, may I share like maybe this is the greatest challenge for many years ahead. This is like the big goal. So, so we're talking about beneficial general intelligence. Um, what I include in this term that it is also it's happy, that it has great welfare, and that it has at least possibility to. Okay, this is gonna sound so uh, esoteric now, but bear with me for a second. Like that it can attain enlightenment. So the idea here is that, I mean, if indeed we share consciousness, if is the same principle, some kind of functional principle in us, in animals, in AI, then since we humans can do it, so then AI can also do it. And I think this is actually our best alignment, hope, because if indeed it reaches this stage of where it truly sees itself as like one with everybody, this is how it will care for us. So there are several approaches tackling that. So, for example, I recently read a paper about contemplative approaches where they were kind of using constitutional AI, so like a set of rules for each question that was based on Buddhist ideas of non-duality, emptiness, compassion. And like, even though I loved it, it was because I'm a Buddhist, so I'm like, yes, finally someone put it in. But also, it's just kind of like a layer in an LLM. Like, it's not deeply felt; it's an imitation of those states. And I would really, really be. I would consider my life's work complete, and many other people's work like done and really amazing when AI can reach this actually physically, experientially. But for that, it kind of needs a self. But this is interesting. This talks about like pre-trans fallacy. You know how like babies, they're also in a state of unity. They're also like don't really understand that they're separate, but we don't call them enlightened. But it takes a self to be like, oh, this is me, and then transcending this self to really like see this oneness, this unity. And I hope that this one day can happen to our AIs.
Amazing, and I agree that's a great challenge. And I wanted to mention also that there are other approaches, like Mike Levin, who was also a keynote speaker at our AGI conference. He just started a program of research which explores patterns in so-called Platonic space. It's the space of mathematics, where he says, at least from his experiments, which are in real life, and he showed the Anthrobots and Xenobots in his keynote, there are patterns in that Platonic space of mathematics that, from which life and 3D existence is drawing ways of being. And so he is fascinated with that and explores, and he has detected several cognitive patterns that will enhance our empathy for everything, until the level of a rock, from how he explores and presents it. And he says, okay, 3D is just one space which we recognize, but we do not actually see the what's happening at those other levels. And that's another thing which you mentioned about this emotional, like, yeah, love and so on. But how about suffering? I mean, what do we do when the AIs are suffering, and will we exhibit empathy for them? And so these are, other cans of worms that are being opened when AI will become able to have these, all sorts of emotions. Any comments on that?
Well, to Michael Levin's work, it's amazing and really mind blowing. I still find it hard to believe. I'm still like, is this for real? Like, really?
And I
Our
will post the link to the symposium, which is happening right now as we speak. And he has many speakers, and it's like I think one per month or one per week. But I will post it when we release this podcast, because all the talks are being recorded, and now the one which he gave is already there at the website. Yes. So yes, indeed, and but it is it's real, and he is using interdisciplinary work and research. Yes, indeed. And so we can move to this suffering unless.
Yeah,
Huh.
suffering is like a really because like the first Buddhist truth is like there is
I
suffering.
mean,
Like
you
that's just
cannot have love without, or happiness without suffering. At least this is what we, as humans, learn. I don't know. Maybe your life is different, but for me, that was, yeah, definitely what life taught me until now.
yeah, and it goes like in Buddhist school, it goes like, and there's suffering because there's craving, it's wanting. And as I'm making this motivational framework, like I sometimes question myself, like, what am I doing? Like, am I creating like, because essentially, like, it will be like motivations. It's kind of like craving, kind of like needs, like what you need to do. Like, what am I creating? Am I like being creating a being that could, suffer in the future, and creating the way it will suffer through motivational frameworks? That is really scary. And this is something that I still haven't solved for myself. But right now, I think that the possibility of it, becoming this truly benevolent and loving creature, it overweighs in my inner like scales. So I'm still continuing with that work.
Totally, and of course, a great challenge, one of the greatest challenges which I can see that your work, will or is facing. So yeah, so we kind of come to a close of our conversation, and really, I wanted to thank you so much. I have, of course, because you are a psychologist, I don't ask everybody this, but I mean, I want to ask you, what would be the meaning of life to you, Anna?
Oh, you kept the most difficult question for the end.
I mean, yes, well, I can give you an alternative to that if
Yeah,
you.
I think the meaning of life changes depending on the context. For me, right now, it is service. So to be of service to others.
Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. Yes. And if you want, if you could leave the listeners with one key insight about AI, consciousness, and our human future, what would it be?
Oh, that's also a tough one. One insight.
Or, a thought.
I would say something like love your own mind and love the mind of the AI.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Maybe that's how we will entitle this podcast. I love it. I love it when we release it. Yes. What a luminous conversation with Anna, a thinker who reminds us that the future of AI is not only about sharper algorithms, but about deeper questions of motivations, of meaning, of alignment with what matters most through attention as a moral act. As we reflect on the discussion and the possibility of artificial consciousness, we also turn the mirror on ourselves. Are we outsourcing our attention too easily? Are we cultivating our own alignment, our own clarity? Anna leaves us with a challenge and an invitation to design both our technologies and our lives. Yes, with recursive self reflection, the courage to evolve, and the grace to recognize consciousness wherever it may emerge. Thank you, Anna, for this amazing and illuminating conversation. Thank you for listening. And until next time, may your mind stay curious and your spirit awake.
Thank you so much. Ciao, ciao.